The sun beat down on Red Hollow, making the wooden streets shimmer in the heat. Dust rose in lazy spirals as townsfolk leaned on fences, their boots scraping against the boards, eyes squinting toward the auction block at the center of town. The air smelled of sweat, leather, and the faint tang of gunpowder from yesterday's gunfight. The old cowboy sat near the edge of the crowd, had pulled low over eyes that had seen more death than most men could imagine. His spurred boots tapped softly on the wooden floor, keeping rhythm with a heartbeat no one could hear. Nobody dared approach him, not even the sheriff. They called him Grave Walker, not for his kills, but for the way he carried his past. Silent and heavy, like a storm waiting to break, the auctioneer banged the gavel. "Next lot!" His voice cracked under the sun, a shrill call that made the crowd stir. Chains rattled as a girl was dragged forward. Her wrists were bound, but she walked without fear, bare feet scraping against the dusty planks. The crowd leaned in, ranchers, drifters, gamblers, all smelling opportunity. But then the old cowboy froze. His hand hovered over his holster, not out of threat, but recognition. On her wrist, barely visible under the glare of the afternoon sun, was a tattoo, 3 thin lines crossing a circle, a mark burned into the skin, not inked. The auctioneer's voice rose over the murmurs. "Do I hear $10? "15. A man yelled from the back. The girl's eyes, calm until now, flickered toward the old cowboy. A spark of recognition passed between them, silent but electric. The old man didn't blink. He didn't breathe heavier, but his heart pounded like a war drum, memories clawing their way out of a grave he had dug 2 decades ago. 20, someone else called. The bidding escalated. Horses pawed, coins clinked, voices raised, but the cowboy's gaze never left the girl's tattoo. He remembered that night, the fire, the screaming, the desert winds carrying smoke into his lungs. He remembered the Red Canyon massacre and the child he had saved and abandoned in the chaos. He remembered burying Daniel Mercer, the man he once was, and taking the name Gravewalker to outrun the ghosts. 30, 40, 50. The auctioneer shouted numbers into the sweltering air, sweat dripping down his red face. Finally, the cowboy rose, boots scraping wood, spurs jingling, hat tilted low. 80, he said, voice low and steady. The crowd turned. The sun reflected off the edges of his face, showing the deep lines carved by time and guilt. Hargrove, a ruthless rancher, spat tobacco. "What's she worth to you, old man?" The cowboy's jaw tightened. Memories surged. The burning village, the mother running with the baby in her arms, bullets whizzing past his ears. 90, he whispered. Silence swallowed the auction block. The girl's eyes widened slightly. She knew him. She had recognized the man who carried the weight of her survival, even if he did not yet acknowledge it aloud. 150! The cowboy bellowed, shocking the entire crowd. Coins fell silent in hands. Whispers floated through the dust-heavy air. Nobody had ever heard such a number. Sold, the gavel struck. The girl remained still, calm, yet her stare pinned him. She did not speak, did not move, as if she were measuring whether he had the courage to pay for more than her freedom. He stepped down from the block and cut her ropes himself. Dust swirled around them as townsfolk gawked. The sun was merciless overhead, making beads of sweat roll down faces. "You were there," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind. "I remember everything," he said, voice cracked but firm. He remembered the fire, the screams, and the child he had saved and left to survive alone. Gunshots suddenly cracked the sunlit street. 3 riders entered Red Hollow, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. The sheriff cursed under his breath. "Black vultures," he muttered. Outlaws, bounty hunters, the kind who hunted not for money, but for blood and vengeance. The girl remained calm. The old cowboy's hand rested on his revolver. Ready, but his heart weighed heavy. He had outrun this moment for 20 years, and yet here it was, standing in the sun, demanding reckoning. "You should run," he said to her. She shook her head. "You bought me. Now you finish the story." The riders dismounted, guns glinting under the blazing light. Their leader held a piece of paper, trembling with anger. "A survivor of Red Canyon lives," he shouted. "Whoever hides her dies with her." The cowboy drew his revolver slowly. His hands, weathered and scarred, were steady. The sun reflected off the steel. He was ready, not for vengeance, but for redemption. "No," he said. The outlaw laughed. "You'll die for her?" The old man's eyes hardened. "I'll die because of me." Shots rang, echoing off the wooden buildings. Dust and smoke swirled. The girl stood beside him, unmoving, like she had been waiting for this moment all her life. 2 riders fell. The leader was skilled, but he underestimated the cowboy. One last shot ended the fight. Silence fell, broken only by the wind blowing dust across Red Hollow. The old cowboy collapsed against a post, bleeding, worn yet alive. The girl knelt beside him. "Why?" she asked. "Because—" "That night, I chose who lived," he whispered. "You lived carrying the death I caused. Today I carry yours." She took his hand, pressed it against her own small wound, and whispered, "Now the spirits see the truth." The sun rose higher, burning away the shadows. Red Hollow lay quiet. For the first time in 20 years, the past had stopped chasing them. The cowboy leaned back, smiling faintly, as the girl stood beside him. Freedom, blood-bought and silent, finally belonged to them both. They left the auction behind, stepping into the blazing afternoon, carrying the weight of survival and redemption under the sun. And the tattoo, once silent, had spoken louder than any gun.